You know what, I'll consolidate it into a big bag.
I like
bag.
Yes.
Yeah, my wife designed it like 10, 12 years ago. So, yeah. Yeah, she used to be a handbag designer and a diaper bag designer. So, yeah. She works for Lowe's. In their private brands, department. Hey, everybody, it's time for some live stuff. So let's do.
Ready? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Douglas A. Welton. I'm the chairman of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission. I'd like to welcome you to our February 10th work session. We're here at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Government Center, room 280. We're at 600 East 4th Street. And waiting for the next slide there. Yeah, there it is. For viewing by the public and the media, today's meeting is being streamed live on the Planning, Design, and Development Department's YouTube page. So you can follow us even when we're not here. And after the meeting, you can go back and see if we said anything that was fun and entertaining that you might want to review. Let's get, and we're having humor moments over in the corner already. So it's going to be a good meeting. We will get started on our meeting today by doing introductions from all of the commissioners that are here. And we will begin to my far left with Commissioner McDonald.
Teresa McDonald, Planning Commission.
Robin Stewart, Planning Commission.
Clayton Seeley, Planning Commission.
Shauna Neely, Planning Commission.
Rebecca Wilden, Planning Commission.
Carolyn Millen, Planning Commission.
Will Russell, Planning Commission.
Andrew Blumenthal, Planning Commission.
Melissa Gaston, Planning Commission.
Michael Caparelli, Planning Commission.
Terry Lansdale, Planning Commission.
Rick Winiker, Planning Commission. And I'm glad that I wasn't the only one to keep us shut out. It's Aaron for a full boat attendance.
Yes. Thank you. And that does remind me that there are 14 members of the Planning Commission. And for those of you who don't know at home, we are appointed 7 of us by the city and 7 by the county. We are missing Commissioner Shaw today. And she sent me a text last week, said she would not be here. I kept the secret, but I'm sure you all saw her last night dancing on stage with Kendrick Lamar at the halftime show. So next time you see her, just say, hey, that blue skirt was really rocking it, babe. And we'll go from there. But we hope to have everybody in our meeting next month. We will begin with staff introductions, and we will begin with Ms. Knight. Will you please take this into a different direction, if you will?
Al Knight, Planning Staff.
Monica Holmes, Interim Planning Director.
Candace Rory, Planning Staff.
We have some guests today along the back row to my right, and can you get us started?
Sarah Hazel, Chief Sustainability and Resiliency Officer.
Robin Byers, Office of Sustainability.
Kathy Cornett, Planning Staff.
Tim Porter, Urban Forester.
Sarah Gagne, Chair, Tree Advisory Commission. Elizabeth McGann, Charlotte Tree Advisory Commission.
Robert Allen, Concerned Citizen.
Robert. We've got one more.
Nan Peterson, Planning.
Thank you, Nan. And for those of you, Robert is interested in being a planning commissioner when he grows up. And Robert and I had a wonderful coffee 2 weeks ago, week ago, something like that. And you guys know that I'm big on trying to recruit us some new commissioners as necessary. So I've already begun the process and had a couple of coffees. If you have anyone that's interested in being a planning commissioner in the future, please connect them with me or something. Make sure that they know the process and the drill. And after this meeting, if you guys will, go be nice to Robert. He's a nice guy. He's a former elected official in a different jurisdiction. So he does kind of get the drill of what we're doing here. Let's go on with our business for this meeting. And we are to the part where we have minutes. And do I have a motion for the disposition of our minutes from our January 13th meeting?
This is Gaston. I make a move to approve the January 13th, 2025 work session minutes.
Second, Wilden.
Has been moved by Gaston, seconded by Wilden. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. So there we are, and life is good. We'll go on to the business of our meeting today. We've got a couple of guests to come in. We're going to talk about the Charlotte Tree Canopy update. We're also going to have a presentation about the Strategic Energy Action Plan, or CAP as people would call it. I'm going to go off the book here just a minute. Monica, do you want to say anything about transition from leadership? Let's go ahead and do that right now since.
Sure, we were going to wait till the end, but I'm happy to do it now. That's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
I'm assuming that most are aware, but Allison has been named the Assistant City Manager and the Interim Economic Development Director. She's actively working to fill that role and learn more about the Economic Development Department. And so with that move, I will be the Interim Planning Director. Or I am. Last week was my first week. So this is my official second week on the job. With that, you'll see a lot more of me, although I think you already saw a lot of me. We have a very skilled staff. So, same leadership in place. For those that don't know, Allison and I have led the department for the past 13, 14 months really together. So we did not have kind of a divided system, which is really beneficial in the transition, meaning that I worked with all the division managers weekly and we did all of our check-ins together and kind of we didn't split up the portfolio. So I think that will kind of pay dividends in the transition and having us all like acclimated to what that looks like. I will just say that, obviously I'm excited about it. If you've lived through a planning director transition at the city before, it is not a short process. We are the only department in the city that has the hiring is governed by an interlocal agreement. So both the city and the county are involved in that, just like you guys are a split body with city and county representation. So is that hiring process. Basically, I say that to say, don't expect for things to change quickly. If you were, I think Allison was interim for a little over a year. Before that, someone was interim for about 3 years. It can take a little bit of time. And so that will be the process. Please feel free to reach out to me if anybody wants to grab coffee or learn more about my background. I've been at the city for 10 years. Where I was before that, I was a consultant for about 10 years and come from kind of the urban design intersection of planning, corridors of opportunity, kind of a wide range of things at the city. And I'm excited about it. So I'm excited that Allison's not gone too. She's still here and planning is in her portfolio. So for those that didn't see the full announcement, she has Charlotte Water, Planning, and Economic Development in her portfolio as an assistant city manager, which means that she helps kind of guide the direction of those on a daily basis. And yeah, I mean, if you have questions and want to ask them now, that's fine. We probably have a couple minutes if you want to do that, and I'll be happy to answer anything you got.
Does anybody have any questions they want to heave right now, or these things we're gonna? No, I'm not seeing anybody. Did you push her out of her chair? Does she have a better chair or anything? I mean, we got to look at this from a strategic point of view of what's really in it for you. And that's all I really care about. But we are happy to have you here in that capacity now, as it won't be that different for us. But if there's anything we can do to support the transition, please make sure you let us know. All right. Cool beans. And one more thing. Last month, Dave came and talked to us a little bit about 382, that wonderful piece of legislation that may have caused a little consternation and dismay. For those of you who don't watch the North Carolina House on regular basis, not talking to you, Terry. Yeah. And let me get the dates right. I think it was, January 29th, House Bill 24 came into to being. And it may correct some of the issues that were caused by the downzoning, but it may not. So those of you who are paying attention, you might want to just say, hey, what's going on with that thing? Because it's legislation. So there's a process, but maybe somebody may be addressing some of our concerns in a quick way, maybe. So there we go. All right, now on to the pinnacle of our afternoon. We are gonna take on the tree canopy update, and that's gonna be Tim Porter. So come give it to us, baby.
Implemented. Thank you. I was using my construction site voice there for a while, so I appreciate that. Right now, our high-level policy is divided into these three areas: the comprehensive plan, the urban forest master plan, which was adopted in 2017, and council's 50 by 50 tree canopy goal, which dates back to 2011. All of those are council adopted. Implementations divided simply in a very basic way into these three buckets: landscape management, the division and general services, where the city arborist works. They're the main operation group. And programs are led by my division. Landscape management has some of their own programs. On the regulatory side, the Charlotte Tree Ordinance still exists. It's not development focused anymore because of the UDO, but there are some really important tree preservation requirements in there, such as the protection of city trees at all time. These are trees in public street right of way. And heritage trees, you might have heard, is somewhat of a newer regulation. It lives in both the UDO and the tree ordinance because it applies to development and non-development scenarios, which is very important to note because every heritage tree on property in the city of Charlotte is protected regardless of development status. So partners are a big part of the work that we, or our philosophy in implementing, the policy and the work we have to do to achieve council's goals. And these are our primary partners. We're always looking to develop new partners. I'll briefly touch on one in the future, but the planning department, my colleagues in the Office of Sustainability and Resilience here, we're working much closer with them than we ever have before. I mentioned landscape management, Tree Charlotte. So public nonprofit partners include them, Catawba Lands Conservancy, and Mecklenburg County. We're working to develop more formal partnerships with park and recreation staff within the county government. So starting to step into an update on Tree Canopy Action Plan 2.0 or TCAP 2. Our vision for the future is to get rid of all these we're planning. We like a lot of plans, but we have, let me go back real quick. We have that hierarchy right now, and I think it's much more simple to look for more linear, comprehensive plan, TCAP. The current Tree Canopy Action Plan is not council adopted. It was essentially data analysis, stakeholder and public engagement, and then recommendations provided to council. And then those recommendations were adopted within the comprehensive plan and the UDO. Our vision for the future is that the Tree Canopy Action Plan 2 will become council adopted. It'll take the 50 by 50 goal, whatever the community and council decides to keep, it'll take the urban forest master plan and marry all of those items with new items in TCAP 2. So we're seeking to have that adopted by council to be the primary tree canopy urban forestry focused plan. So that's a bit of a pivot. And then implementation is essentially going to stay the same. This is oversimplified. There's many more services and programs and tasks and initiatives that implement the policy. So the current vision for TCAP 2, which we are planning to initiate this calendar year, is to, again, have some data analysis. We're looking at taking our baseline data from our recent canopy analysis and conducting additional analysis as needed. We're starting to discuss possibly doing another broad countywide deep dive analysis, but that's TBD. Engagement, of course, is a key part of any policy initiative. Work with stakeholders, develop recommendations, formulate a plan for council to review and ultimately adopt that focuses on our primary implementation areas, regulatory, operational, and programs. And education and engagement is a big part of all of those three buckets. One of the biggest questions to tackle and determine path forward on is what are we going to do with 50 by 50? The city has a goal of attaining 50% canopy coverage across the entire city. That dates back to 2011, as I said earlier. Current industry recommendations suggest that a one-size-fits-all blanket high-scale canopy goal should not be your primary or only focus. And I think staff believes in that. I don't know if we need to get rid of 50 by 50. It's technically still attainable, although we'll really have to ramp up planting and preservation initiatives to achieve that. We may look at a more scalable, diverse, intentional, strategic goal, maybe as canopy cover percentages by place type. Those are currently recommendations in the 2040 plan. They may be adopted council policy in the future, along with adding much more intentional strategic goals, such as having, for example, stocking levels, a big focus area. That means any plantable location along a sidewalk, a pedestrian path, greenway, has canopy cover when it's reasonable and feasible to do. And we really want to have a foundation where we build and align more with the current ongoing efforts of the update to the CIAP. So connecting tree canopy and Sustainability policy is a very intentional effort right now. So switching into the Tree Canopy Preservation Program, or TCPP. Again, this is the program that takes developer paid fee dollars during land development permitting and goes and acquires land for conservation to offset tree save that wasn't provided on developer property. So this ordinance option dates back to 2011. It's not available to development customers in every scenario. It's typically the more dense and urban locations. Prior to the 2040 comprehensive plan, it was based off of the growth framework of centers, corridor, and wedge, which has been retired. But the more urban, dense, transit focused location, the more options you had. So if a development customer elected to use payment in lieu, they'd write a check to the city. That'd be phase one, and get their permit. The city would take that revenue and go acquire conservation land to preserve the tree canopy that wasn't provided. So over the course of the last 9 years, the city has preserved over 350 acres, protected over 50 properties. We've expanded this program to include more than your traditional forested conservation areas, which are really important. But we realized somewhat early on that this program does not do eminent domain. So we acquire land via fee simple acquisition on the open market. We'll take donations, but it's difficult to compete. And so we had a lot of trouble finding forested areas in dense urban areas where the revenue was coming out of. So we developed a concept called the Urban Arboretum Trail that targeted smaller properties and had a connecting feature such as a trail to kind of, bind those together to be more strategic and intentional with the community. And so we have a host of properties that range from 100 acres all the way down to like 0.1 acres. They're all considered conservation land, but some of them are activated. There's been placemaking efforts on some of them as well. Moving forward, we've expanded it the last 2 years to really ramp up our acquisition level. These are 2 properties that were acquired within the last 2 years. The property in the top right, as you can see, that's River District. So that's southwestern part of Charlotte. The property on the lower right is North Tryon at Eastway. Totally different part of the city. 6.3 acres. So I think that's mandatory referral 2417. That's about 6.3 acres. Across the street is the River District's conservation area. If you've heard about that, that's under conservation easement with the Catawba Lands Conservancy. So is our property that we acquired across the street. So we partner with that conservation entity as much as possible to ensure these properties are protected in perpetuity. So moving forward, today we've expanded our acquisition strategy to be more focused, more intentional. We've also expanded how we can actually take properties in. So we're focusing on areas, in addition to where the revenue is coming out of, we're focusing on areas that are priority canopy areas, and I'll get to that in a second. We're prioritizing conservation corridors. For example, we're trying to connect our 100-acre Doe Creek property to the Reedy Creek Nature Preserve. So we're working to purchase land, receive donations from development customers, partner with the county to connect a corridor of properties that would, I don't have the acreage off the top of my head, but combined with Reedy Creek and all the connected tree save, that'd be over 500 acres of conservation that's linked together, which I think is pretty impressive in the city of Charlotte. We're prioritizing, key policy areas in the 2040 plan. We're looking for land donations. There's also new options in the UDO where development customers can donate their land to the city, to our TCPP program. That provides some extra credit. So it's incentivized to, it does reduce the amount of land a developer has to preserve, but if it's high value area, we'll accept that into the program, protect it in long-term conservation entity status, which is very different than tree save. Tree save can be moved. Tree save is not there forever. So this is a new tool that came online last year. And this is a snapshot, it's not interactive on the screen here, but it prioritizes canopy areas based on items ranging from low canopy, possible canopy, temperature. And so we can select areas to target based on our policy goals. And then I can, request our real estate team to go find areas in those, I think those are census blocks, neighborhood profile areas to purchase. So what's on the horizon? These are 2 mandatory referrals that will be coming forward. They just went to Joint Use Task Force last week. This is a good example of how we have quite a range of property types. This is a 2.5 acre property on Lawyers Road, which is, you probably can't see it, but that's Albemarle Road. No way, now I can see that. And the snapshot on the left just shows you that it's located in an area that was prioritized, meaning there's low canopy, high temperature, a host of other things kind of led to like, okay, this assessment ensures this property makes sense to acquire based on our canopy goals. There's a house on it. Years ago, they used to scare us away. We don't want to deal with structures, conservation, we don't want to deal with it, but we're working through a new partnership. I didn't put it on the slide yet because it hasn't really come to fruition yet, but we're working with affordable housing staff to partner on land acquisition, potentially carving out conservation. Affordable housing would take, the house, maybe a new parcel, and that would be kind of repurposed and go back into housing use, and preservation all around that. So we're looking at new models to trees and housing. So that's something we're hoping to achieve in the next year. A very different scenario here. This is Village Lake Drive. Again, you can see the little icon over there. Not as highly prioritized for tree canopy issues, but it's still in a concern area. Red, orange, yellow, those are worse. The green areas doing pretty good with canopy. This is a property that has stormwater infrastructure on it. So we're really trying to be strategic, intentional, in some cases aggressive to achieve canopy goals. This is something we're experimenting with. There's a really, you can see that detention pond right there is a really nice detention pond, but it's a water management DMP for multiple residential areas. And there's a major culvert under the road there, and it flows into this creek corridor. So massive infrastructure there that we're going to work with our stormwater colleagues in the city and the county to maintain. We're going to clean up that canopy area, reforest it as needed. One example of, or another example of the type of lands we're looking to take on. So by the numbers, this is moving into the urban forestry group. This is the land development regulatory group. In 2024, we reviewed about 6,500 projects. That includes residential infill, commercial subdivision, a non-development permits. If someone wants to remove a heritage tree from the backyard, that's included in that number. For actual permit reviews, meaning if a project got reviewed 3 or 4 or 5 times, the total for all the reviews for those projects was just north of 13,000. For heritage trees, we're working to get a final number here, but well over 200 trees were removed and 500 mitigation trees are required to be planted to offset that. We have a new team called the preservation team that focuses on compliance. It's like a tree code enforcement. And so this team goes back out and they inspect sites that already came through permitting to ensure any required trees that were planted or preserved are still there. We completed 948 of those inspections and almost 9,000 total for the whole group. What we found is that about half the sites we inspected, they're missing trees. So required trees. So if you look out the window there, all those parking lots you see, all the trees in the parking lots, they're required to have trees. And so if they're not there, we We request the property owner replant the trees. We don't want to assess penalties and fines, but that's another mechanism we utilize to ensure those trees get replanted. So there's some by the numbers there for our regulatory wing, for our programs group. Oh, sorry, I got ahead of myself here. I just wanted to bring this up, is that 65% of our canopy loss that's occurring every year is occurring in residential areas. By far, the biggest sources, and this is surprising to us, incrementally on single family lots. So it's not the mass clear cutting, which is a source of canopy loss, but collectively every year, the greatest source of canopy loss is incremental infill residential lots. So that's one of the reasons why we have these new regulations for infill, for heritage trees. So our tree canopy programs group, this is where TCPP is, Canopy Care. In 2024, we acquired 12 properties for approximately 68 acres of additional conservation land. And we have a new partner, the North Carolina Wildlife Federation, awarded us, we think this grant is still viable, $125,000 to reforest TCPP properties, because not all the land that we acquire in our conservation program is forested. Sometimes it's vacant, sometimes it's old farmland, sometimes it's really poor quality forest that we're going to improve the health of, which means cut down some trees selectively and reforest, replant the right ones, native trees. So, and again, in closing, I really appreciate the opportunity and the invitation, and thank you for your time and attention today. And I'm happy to take questions now if that's.
Thank you very much, Tim. Yeah, we got questions. Commissioner Lansdale, do you have a question?
I think I might be giving you the hard one first, so you'll get better after.
I got hard ones too.
So, can you go back to your second slide, please? If you're able to do that, Tim. Maybe the third slide then. The one where you say 29% impervious surface, very loud and very clear. There we go. What does that number mean? Can you explain that number? How did you get to that number?
So that number, I believe, is as part of this analysis, there was a land cover analysis. We didn't do just tree canopy cover. It looked at water, it looked at bare earth and impervious. So I believe that number is the impervious cover for Mecklenburg County that our analysis found.
Okay, that your analysis found. Okay, and that is done by like satellite imaging. How is that done? No property evaluation, no land use evaluation. How do they get to that 29%? And I'm trying to get to this so I can get my statement out.
So it's a high level top down GIS analysis. I looked at aerial imagery, use LiDAR, AI to assess the aerial imagery and land cover LiDAR to quantify what type of land cover in each of those.
So with that 29%, it could be a parking lot, it could be a driveway, it could be a rooftop.
Yes.
It could be a pool, it could be a covered patio or a storage shed out back.
Possibly, yeah.
Okay. So,
right. So yeah, our analysis was a consultant called Planet Geo. And the methodology they use, there's no standard way to do countywide assessments for this type. So their methodology differed than Mecklenburg County's analysis.
Appreciate you saying that, Tim. There's no methodology to account for this. Is that what you just said?
No, that there's no standardized methodology.
Standardized methodology. Great.
Multiple different types of methodology
real
are accepted and used. Yeah.
It's a real challenge. We have these kinds of tools and data available. In one of our previous presentations, we talked about the developed land is a specific number that is defined by impervious surface by taxable products. Right? That's how we do our tax base. So that is a real number, and it was presented to us at 12.8%. Through a lot of effort with my conversation with the Department of Transportation, we've come to the determination, I'm still not in agreement with them, but every local, state, and federal road in Mecklenburg County has an impervious surface area of 6.8%. Valid data coming from the city, county and the Department of Transportation. That's why when I saw that 29%, I'm like, what is that number? How'd you get there? It's a hard one for me to swallow because it's not a real number for me. It's not based in specific data fact. It's based in specific analysis of data, but what does it really include? Let's just say that's 29% plus 12.8%. I see maybe a colleague adding this up. 6.8% is roads. We got 48.6% of our Mecklenburg County now, our city of Charlotte. No trees. We have 49% is our tree canopy in Mecklenburg County. If those two numbers are correct, how will we ever get to a 50% in 2050 or anytime? For me, I think when I see that number, it's a real red flag for me to understand that. And I want everybody to know, I feel very much a serious part of the problem. Because on zoning, I had approved over 360 rezonings that did not contribute to the goal of the CAP and tree canopy preservation. But I want to caution you about that 29% impervious surface, because if that's the case, if we compile that with other real data for our county and community, a 50 by 50 is truly unattainable. So I think that's a real issue for me when I see numbers like that, when we're talking about such an important issue for us, for heat impacts, for redevelopment, for business and economic improvement, for the longevity of transportation. This is a real issue for us as we move forward. And I appreciate the presentation, but I do have to call out, and that's the reason why I wanted to start first. These guys will be less hard, I'm sure. But when I see that, I just don't see how we can reach that 50 by 2050 in any way, shape, or form, unless there is some drastic action for how we redevelop our property in Mecklenburg County. I'll leave it at that, but thank you. Unless you.
Thanks for your feedback.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else got a question? Anybody on this side? Commissioner Weldon.
Yes. How much are the fines for non-compliance?
Yeah.
Because that could be a lot of money. I'm just saying.
I would have to check our Charlotte Tree Manual to see what it varies depending on the compliance issue, if there's a violation that's just existing. So it's hundreds of dollars.
Oh, it should be a lot more. Also, how long do they have to get into compliance?
Again, I have to check that manual because I'm not involved in the day-to-day, but I think there's a 30-day window to acknowledge and in good faith effort to take steps to regain compliance. There is some seasonal aspects here. So if it's the height of summer, which is a very poor time to plant trees, there are some options to delay it. There's a binding letter someone could issue and sign that would lock them in to plant it by the end of the ordinance defined planting season. So it can vary.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Millen.
Hey, Tim, thank you for being here. Couple of questions. When it comes to getting all this information out about the tree canopy program and everything, I don't think we're doing enough to get it out to our residents. Being a neighborhood president, I speak at every one of our meetings and I still have neighbors going, what are you talking about? So I don't think we're doing as good a job as we could to really get this out to especially neighborhoods that are taking down trees in their yards and everything else. I want to throw that out that maybe we need to brainstorm on how to do that better job. And the second one is with the many tree companies we have in Charlotte. Obviously, they should know about this tree canopy. Are they held responsible for going in and taking down trees that should their heritage, and they don't get somebody from your department to come out and say, okay, this is dead, this isn't dead, this is heritage? How are they held accountable, or are they?
They are, if we're aware and if we can have some reasonable amount of evidence to enforce. For example, if the tree is removed completely, then it's difficult for us to have something to base a violation on. But as I said earlier, city manager and council provided a new preservation team that's sole job is to issue permits for heritage trees and to monitor compliance. So we have stepped up our enforcement of that, our capacity of it. So they are held accountable if we're aware of it, and we have some data and evidence to base a violation on.
Commissioner Gaston and then Blumenthal. Michael, you got one?
Yeah.
All right. And then, okay, all right. Commissioner Gaston.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a question about you said that the infill lots are where you're seeing the extreme loss going on in Charlotte. And as we know, that seems to be the areas that are the inner city or the outer, whatever you call them, whatever the name is for those areas. And so you have the Canopy Care program. I've seen the application for that program, and I'm assuming that it's income-based because they're asking for your income. Is there anything that says what that income base is? Do you have an idea of what it's based on?
I don't have that off the top of my head. I can get the information for you. We have 2 pilot projects ongoing right now, one led by my colleagues in General Services,
Okay.
the City Arborist Group. They're the ones that are managing that part of the pilot program.
Mhm.
When that's complete, that's going to merge into one program managed by my division, but I can get that information for you.
Okay.
Long-term, the vision is to have it citywide available to residents.
Yeah, because my question would be, if I'm struggling to stay in my house, I'm not caring about the trees. I mean, unless it's about to fall on my house. So that's a concern. And then if you have it at a certain income level, people may be challenged and if you don't know what it is. And then my other question about that application, it asks and says you're going to do a background criminal check. Why? What does that matter? That's the question I would take back. Why?
Okay.
What does it matter if there's,
That's fun.
yeah,
I'd have to research that and get back to you on that. I'm
okay,
not sure.
that would be great. Thank you.
You know, we have a criminal defense lawyer over there. If you allegedly take down a tree.
We're getting to be good buddies.
Yeah. Commissioner Caprioli.
Yeah, thank you. Do you also work out in the ETJ?
We enforce regulations in the ETJ, and we implement, let me get to my program slide here. We implement some programs in the ETJ, like TCPP, yes.
Oh, okay. Because that's my area, southwest out there in the forgotten zone of the ETJ. Can you also explain to everybody what a heritage tree is?
Sure.
Yeah.
A heritage tree by definition is a native tree to North Carolina, 30 inches in diameter at a height of, we call DBH, which is an old forester term for diameter at breast height. It's 4.5 feet off the ground. If it's 30 inches in diameter, native tree to North Carolina, it's considered a heritage tree. And if it's in the city limits at all times, it's protected.
Yeah.
In the ETJ, it's only protected if development triggers UDO requirements. So the blanket protection only exists in the city limits.
Okay.
So if you're in the ETJ and you want to remove a heritage tree from your backyard and there's no other type of protection on it, you don't have to get a permit from the city. But if it's part of a tree save area, if it's part of some other type of requirement, it gets a little complex there, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, just to answer the question earlier about do landscaping companies know about it, I did have an incident. Bland was called out to remove a tree and then they said they couldn't because it was a heritage tree and then they had to work with hardwood to get a permit. So it all depends on who the vendor is, how current they are. We already talked about enforcement. You also work with Charlotte Stormwater regarding the enforcement issues?
I mean, we partner with them on enforcement when a tree save area or some other type of tree canopy regulatory area overlaps
Right.
with the stormwater area. We've also attempted to partner with them on land acquisition. They have a similar program to acquire, I'm gonna get the terminology wrong, but natural area
Yeah.
to offset stormwater management choices a development customer chose to fee in lieu, payment in lieu. So we do work with them in a smaller capacity.
And I just bring that up because you happen to be working with us. It didn't seem like you could do the enforcement area. We had a school that decided to tear down about an acre of heritage trees. And you said bad people, replace those trees. But Charlotte Stormwater stepped in and they have a hold on their certificate of occupancy for the new building that they built. So that's going to encourage them to rebuild their trees. Partnerships, it seems like the only trees you want to get are when people want to donate the land. Is there a way where a private organization could say, we guarantee we'll leave these trees alone, but we're going to keep the land?
Yes, we're open to accepting conservation easements. Property owners could also use their land as compliance options, unofficially land bank it and potentially use it as tree save.
If you could do that, I probably got 100 acres. We could probably get you.
Yeah, we're very open. That's one of the new acquisition methods we're pursuing is we will purchase conservation easements. And in some cases, we prefer that because then the land management responsibility is not solely on the city. It's on the property owner. But, we would enforce the conservation easement to ensure whatever was agreed upon maintains that status. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you. I mean, I moved to Charlotte 6 years ago and the trees were a big portion of it coming from Los Angeles where everything had to be, I think it was a mandatory, everything had to be covered with cement and asphalt. I'm very grateful for all the trees.
I'm glad.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
We've got Commissioner Blumenthal is going to have a quick question and then Commissioner Winokur is going to have a quick question.
Yeah, Tim, thank you. Just see what time it is. Follow up offline with some of these. But just quickly, appreciate Commissioner Lansdale's point earlier. And as you keep that in consideration, I think one thing is obviously a tree planted does not have a one-to-one kind of correlation with the canopy cover, right? But I'd be curious to see how you continue to think about that in terms of canopy covering impervious surfaces, things like that. Second, what was the other one? Commissioner Wilden's point about enforcement mechanisms. If you wouldn't mind, and again, not that we're incapable of doing our homework, but just kind of where to look in that plan so that we can look at that. I know that some of the tree save requirements, and in many cases, they're just complaining, but from the development community has been one of the issues. And if the enforcement is not, let's call it more than a slap on the wrist, then I think you're going to see people making a conscious decision to just ignore the requirement because they know that the punishment is gonna be lesser, right? So something to keep in mind. I do want to have a further conversation, Commissioner Russell and I, about some of the affordable housing and your partnerships there, but we can do that offline. So thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Winokur.
Very briefly, just trying to, I was thinking about the county, thinking about how, the county can really do more to step up to work with your program, with the city on this program and, and a more formal partnership. In the data that you had from the 2023 tree canopy analysis, it appears to me like the data is from all of Mecklenburg County.
That's correct.
And your analysis of that in talking about like what are our tree canopy goals and acreage and things like that, are you like how can we tune our ears to listen? What part of this are you talking about in the county versus the area where you have jurisdiction in the city?
So we acknowledge it's important to think regionally. We need to be aware and think about areas outside of our footprint, but we are focused primarily on the city of Charlotte and its ETJ, but we are talking with Mecklenburg County staff in the county manager's office. Had a discussion last week with the sustainability staff in Mecklenburg County as they grow their focus on tree canopy as a policy item, which I'm very excited about to work with them. I think a great way we can intersect with them to start a more robust partnership is on areas we overlap within our footprints. I know Tree Charlotte has general interest in looking at considering expanding beyond just Charlotte. I mean, Tree Charlotte, it's in the name, but I think we see Mecklenburg County, that footprint. It involves other towns, but it's a complex situation. But right now, I think the best place that we can kind of focus our efforts are where we overlap within our city limits, within the ETJ and the county parks, nature preserves, and other policy efforts they may have.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to close this out. I have four. Some people have taken some of mine already, and they are mean people. But the 50% compliance number, a simple question, are you working on a strategy? That number looks like an open wound when you present this. Somebody would have an emotional reaction that says 50% compliance. Do you have a strategy for lowering that numbers? Because if it's at 10% compliance, I don't think anybody would have asked a question about it. But do you have a strategy for lowering that number?
Our strategy is to really dig into it in TCAP 2 to see what the community and key stakeholders feel about it, because I think technically it's attainable, but it is a significant change needed to really move the needle to feasibly attain 50% canopy coverage to the tune. If you look into that.
No, the 50% of compliance.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
Forget what I just said.
Yeah.
In many areas in this newer division, we're starting to ramp up our education and awareness efforts. And so that's one of them, is to start more of an engagement focus with property managers. The majority of those properties that are out of compliance are commercial properties. We have not stepped into the residential world to start going door to door to say you're missing trees. We're really focusing primarily on commercial properties right now. So our first step is develop an outreach program to talk to HOAs or property management associations, key property managers in our footprint. We have a customer service enhancements effort that's starting up this month that will continue through the spring. Part of that is creating materials and tools for customers from kind of mom and pop who want to build a deck, and they have to know what kind of permit they need, to property management people managing massive subdivisions and multi-use properties. So increasing awareness is our primary focus right now. And we're working on brainstorming ideas on how to get to those managers.
Okay. Second question. You had a number up there. It was a 4-digit number of the number of reviews you've done after the UDO. Do you know how many reviews you did prior to the UDO, so we can see if that number is bigger or smaller?
This is just for the calendar year of 24. So it doesn't include everything post UDO. But to give some batteries running low here.
Okay.
Yeah. To give some context, is prior to the UDO, our review totals were in the hundreds.
Okay.
For total projects and total reviews, and now we're well into the thousands.
Last one I'll do, and that was Commissioner Millen asked about getting the word out to the public, and appreciate your presentation. There was no why in your presentation from my point of view. And, to me, to convince people to do something, you got to give them a why. And so, I feel there was an absence of a reason for somebody to care. And I don't mean that to be coarse, but mean it to be purposeful. If you're going to create some change in the community, it starts with why. It doesn't start with the data. Great, we've got these many acres, but that doesn't tell anybody how the day is going to be better. And so that's just my comment.
Okay.
And I'll leave it at that. And thank you very much, Tim.
Thanks.
We've got one of the commissioners from the Tree Advisory Committee.
Monthly basis. Thank you. My name's Elizabeth McGann. I'm the Associate Chairperson of the Charlotte Tree Advisory Commission. I just wanted to add some additional color that, the tree staff works very hard. It's very labor intensive to do the inspections. So it's a budget constraint issue. Like Tim said, the number of inspections required because of the UDO have gone through the roof, and, the head count hasn't kept up, labor hasn't kept up. And they do put fines in place. Our board enforced one up to, I want to say, $30,000 on a development group. So I just wanted to say staff is working hard and doing good work. And also I wanted to say thank you for inviting us to this. And it's been very inspiring to see how engaged all the members are. And we're excited to bring all the commentary kind of back to our Tree Advisory Commission. So thank you.
Thank you very much. When's the next time you guys are having a Tree Advisory Committee meeting?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. What time?
4:30.
4:30, this room?
Right here.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Sounds great.
Okay? And anybody else that wants to come hang in. Thank you very much,
Thanks
Tim.
again. I appreciate it.
All right, let us roll, folks. We've got 50 minutes to have more of this party, and now Sarah Hazel and Robin Byers are going to give us the latest CAP stuff-em-a-bob. Yeah. You know, buttload is also a technical term too, so.
Okay, thank you, guys. We're gonna keep this party rolling. I really appreciate the invitation to come and speak with y'all today and see a lot of very familiar faces and a couple new faces. Again, I'm Sarah Hazel. I'm the city's Chief Sustainability and Resiliency Officer. I've worked for the city for about 10 years. First 5 years in the city manager's office and in one capacity or another as interim and now Chief Sustainability and Resiliency Officer. But just a little note, my background is in campaign work and organizing. Did a lot of work around environmental issues in my previous career. So I happen to have pretty much the best blending of both worlds here in this role. So I definitely appreciate the work that you do in an advisory capacity and as private residents who just deeply care about the city. And I know it really makes a difference to our work. And so I'm really, really pleased to be here. So I'm going to be joined by Dr. Byers, who's our Strategic Energy Action Plan update manager. But what I want to do is just talk a little bit about our Strategic Energy Action Plan. I know that we have come and done a few presentations to you before, but just a little bit of level setting for folks who haven't heard much about it. So the city of Charlotte has a goal to not only lead here in North Carolina or in the Southeast, but to truly be a global leader when it comes to sustainability and resilience, but to do it in a way that centers equity and people in its work. And so that is the mission of our team, and that is the mission of our city. So now I'm going to get a little geeky, but then I'm going to talk a little bit about the why. So the real reason here that we focus on greenhouse gas emissions in our Strategic Energy Action Plan is because the emissions that cities are responsible for are the biggest contributor to global warming. And so we have a very important responsibility to address those emissions and to look at what tools we have to make a difference in this area. This is from our Strategic Energy Action Plan dashboard. So I know that this is a group just from listening to your questions that really likes data. So please feel free to go onto our dashboard and look at some of the different areas that we focus on. This is our 2019 greenhouse gas emissions. Robin's going to show you our update. So this is not the newest, but I show this to you just to say our largest emitting sectors are transportation and the way we power our buildings, residential and commercial. And so what this means is our focus in the Strategic Energy Action Plan has very important pillars: transportation, buildings, energy generation, and then really the workforce to drive all of those pieces. But it very much relates and speaks to the work of planning, of the Charlotte Future 2040 plan, of investments and work around transit and sustainable transportation, and the impacts of climate related to heat and things like tree canopy. So this is not on an island. While this is a little bit geeky because it's called the CAP, Strategic Energy Action Plan, but it's really our main climate action plan. And so because we generate not just us, but cities globally, 70% of global emissions, this is so critically important. I know I'm sort of preaching to the choir here. So climate change affects all of us, but it definitely doesn't affect all of us equally. It has a disproportionate impact on Black and Brown communities, Indigenous populations, the folks who are the least responsible for climate change. And so that is why, sort of back to our mission, we focus on equity as a key component of this work, and needs to continue to be a key component of this work, and is a little bit more deliberately embedded throughout our updated Strategic Energy Action Plan that we're in the process of updating right now. So there we are. These are our focus areas, and existing today, we have two goals: to source 100% of our energy use from buildings and fleet from zero carbon sources, and to become a low carbon city by 2050, to work towards that goal of reducing the impact on climate, and to do our part as a city seeking to lead in this state and globally to address climate. So we've done this work for 5 years. What does that look like? Did everybody here park in the parking deck across the street? Oh, good. Oh, see, that's great. Even more sustainable. But if you did, you'll notice on the front of the parking deck, there's a variety of electric vehicle chargers. Those used to house our motor pool fleet. We since completed a huge project. So those are all open and available to the public. So if you drive an EV, please feel free to charge your vehicle there. But we do this by updating our facilities, and that is one example, both supporting public EV charging, but really primarily our own fleet. And so the top of that deck, if you want to get a good view from maybe the 3rd floor, you can see that we have over 50 chargers. We have a solar panel, and you can also see that we've upfitted this building above the chamber with solar. So we've been working on how we address this through the assets that we have as a municipality, but also the tools that we have as a city. Good examples of that around fleet electrification include things in the Unified Development Ordinance, like our EV charging requirement, which is a requirement which is actually the strongest requirement in North Carolina, and one of the strongest requirements in the South to ensure that people have access to EV charging. So that's just a couple examples. I won't go through them all, but we focus on policies like that. We focus on projects like I just described, and then programs that enable this work. And so as we charge into the future, pun intended, we are looking at updating our CAP with the latest science. So since the CAP was adopted by City Council, it's been 5 years. And so what does the latest science tell us about what we must do to address our health and to address our environment? We want to update it to include the citywide plans that weren't in place in 2018, like Charlotte Future 2040, like our updated tree canopy action plan, like our strategic mobility plan that has a goal of mode shift, which ties directly into how we address those transportation emissions, and then other priorities that our city council has. And so big opportunity, lots of great work has been done. You can see a couple more examples of some of our assets here. We've got Sweepy McSweep Face in the right-hand corner, which is our bike lane electric street sweeper that the community named that name. And I think we have an example of one of our newest solar canopies out at Fire and Police Headquarters. So lots of work to do, and definitely need the input of all of you and the rest of the community to make it an even stronger plan as we get into this update. So before I do that, I will say we're building on some good momentum. When I started in this role, I think we were 68th from the American Council for Energy Efficiency Economy out of the biggest cities. We're now in the top 25. And so the efforts, the work of our city council, the investments, the policy work, all of that has really made a difference in how we're viewed, but really in reducing emissions. And that's why we track that on our dashboard. Just recently, we won an innovation award. I say that because a lot of this stuff is hard to see, but we have a new policy as a city with our municipal buildings, which says that we will only build municipal buildings that are all electric, so no new natural gas. So we were able to be recognized for that and its impact on emissions reductions. And then finally, we're on a trajectory with a really big offsite solar project that we entered into early last year to be really within shot of those zero carbon buildings projected goals. So lots of good work and a lot more to do. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Byers, who's going to talk about what we're doing here, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions. Also had a lot of coffee, so I spoke a little bit fast. So forgive me.
We just thought
Eagles,
we thought we just turned you up to like 1.5 when you're watching the YouTube video. So you can keep that going. Yeah. Oh, no one, they want to hear this slowly.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to keep us going. So our project timeline, I want to go over, we are following the same kind of iteration timeframe that most long range plans do. Review every 5 years, update every 10 if it's warranted. So we've been implementing this for 5 years, and now what? We got to relook at everything, as Sarah said, talk about the latest science and whatnot. But really, we started before we initiated the project. As Sarah mentioned, we have a CEP dashboard. I have specifically talked to your chair about this because he grilled me when I worked on your 2040 dashboard. So we know how important dashboards are. But we worked really hard to get that out with the available data that's consistently measured and that we can depend on. We're going to continue to build that out as we go and as we update our plan. And so we started, we worked on updating our greenhouse gas emissions inventory for 2023. So now we have 2015, 2019, and 2023. We added a climate risk assessment. So this is new. This is the plus. We're calling it CEP plus. This is the plus that we've added in. And that really is, you know, Sarah talked a lot about the beginning on why we're doing this. We started focusing on greenhouse gas emissions and really focus in on that energy use. But now we want to make sure that there is a direct connection with climate and what we're doing and how they work together. And I'll get into that in a little bit. We also started community outreach and technical advisory engagement in phase 1. We finalized everything in phase 2, and we're now in phase 3, which is the winter springtime. We're wrapping up our engagement now. We'll have one more public meeting. We're going to finalize our draft documents, get them out on the website so everyone can review them, and then we're headed toward council adoption. This is a quick pace for us. So really want to start with greenhouse gas emissions and like why we even do this. Why? The main why is what Sarah had said, right? We're on track to hit 2 degrees Celsius of warming. Climate uncertainty has led to a lot of people caring about greenhouse gas emissions. And that's really where a lot of that came out of. People started measuring that right away because of that climate uncertainty. The impact. Why do we measure this? Measuring it allows us to focus our strategies and make sure that we're investing our money in ways that make a great and large impact. Again, Sarah mentioned the sectors, transportation, and then how we power our homes and our commercial buildings. Those are our biggest areas. So let's make sure we're tackling those. A financial impact. There's always going to be a financial impact, whether we realize it or not. Sustainability has environment, equity, and economics. If we don't make sure it's economically sound, it's not going to last. And so what does that mean in terms of greenhouse gas inventory? If we're not tracking our emissions, we lose a little bit of competitiveness in the emerging green job sector. But as well as, I shared this over the weekend, Clayton knows this. I've had people ask me, what are we doing about sustainability? Can you put something on a sheet? Because there's a business interested in Charlotte and they want to know what you guys are doing about sustainability. So a lot of global and larger companies are asking for this stuff. So it helps us stay competitive in that market as well. And then connections. We are connecting, like Sarah said, strategic mobility plan's a big one. They have some great things in there. We directly connect with the Charlotte 2040 plan. I have a list of policy recommendations from the plan that directly connect to what we're doing. Tree canopy action plan, we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go as well. But there are all these interconnections that we can make with the larger larger city viewpoint. I don't know if Sarah mentioned it earlier, but the Office of Sustainability is a horizontal office. So we actually work across the city. We literally talk to every single department and we try to find these strategic connections to make sure it makes sense. And we're investing responsibly. And then lastly, with the community, if we can track it, we can show the measures, we can show the impact. It'll help us identify and prioritize actions. But we can also talk to the community about this because not everything is a city function. We need the community to help us achieve these goals. And so if we can do it collaboratively with the same information, we can create better and more effective solutions. And so here's what everyone gets really excited about. Here is our greenhouse gas emissions. So I want to point out a couple of the key points first. Our emissions inventory right now for 2020 2023 has us on track of actually hitting our 2050 goal, which is really exciting. That low carbon city is about 2 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per person. And we are on track to hit that, which is great. The inventory, the methodology that we used for 2023, we followed the national protocols. There's CDP. Have you guys heard of that? Carbon Disclosure Project. That's what it used to stand for. They got rid of the name, but kept the acronym, which is kind of confusing. But if you look up CDP, you'll find it. It is global methodology of doing things. We followed that, but we also tweaked a lot of our methodology this time around. It's really important for us to make sure we're doing it as accurately as possible. And so we had a lot more local data that we could use this time around. And so you'll see some things have adjusted if you looked at these numbers in the past. For instance, on our dashboard, it said that we were at 12 total tons of CO2 per capita in 2015 and 11 point something in 2019. Those have been adjusted because of our methodologies. And so we started at 13.6, then 12.4 in 2019. 2023, we're measuring at 8.7 per capita. So pretty big drop down. Some of that, again, is the methodology. So let me highlight a couple of those things for you. We use something called an emissions factor. It's how we weigh certain things and in the math and the science. 2015 and 2019 in our previous iterations, we used a national emission factor. This year in 2023, we had a local emissions factor that we could use that we got directly from Duke Energy and verified. And so Charlotte's actually been more energy efficient largely than a lot of the country. And so we're actually showing that the emissions factor has us doing a lot better than we originally thought. And so we've adjusted. I also want to point out we've added waste, commercial waste. So if you looked at our previous inventory, we had residential waste. This time around, we found methodology that we feel really comfortable with that can more accurately reflect also the commercial waste coming out of Charlotte as well. So that's been added into that waste sector, which is bubblegum pink on the bottom. So those are some of the methodology changes that we've had. But again, you can see overall, we're on a track, we're lowering per capita. I think it's really important to measure per capita. You guys are obviously involved in our planning. You know how fast we're growing. And so, yes, we have total emissions and we need to follow that, but we also need to make sure we're tracking per capita so that we can see the benefits even as we grow. Other things, just want to point out 2019 to 2023, there's a 30% reduction. And some of the reasons for this are cleaner electric grid. So we do have to give props to Duke where it's due. Not everybody wants to do that, but we do have a cleaner energy grid than some folks, and we're continuing to get cleaner. Energy efficiency initiatives, like we have something called Power Down the Crown, which is a voluntary benchmarking program for businesses in Charlotte to help reduce their energy use, more EVs and hybrid vehicles and what have you. All right, I know I talk a lot. I'm going to try and go a little quicker. Climate risk assessment. I said this is new. Why? Why are we doing this? Why did we add that? Well, again, the why here is the same thing as the why for greenhouse gas emissions. World's getting warmer. We need to track it and keep up with it. But the impacts, what impacts climate, solutions that we have to mitigate or adapt to climate change also will help us reduce our overall greenhouse gas emissions. So we're kind of getting 2 for 1, right? Financial impacts as we, again, as we shift, if the whole world shifts and we don't, then we're not as competitive. So there's that financial benefit. Connections are relatively the same. And then in terms of the community, our climate risks are far reaching. It affects people's health. It affects the cost of things like utility bills. It affects quality of life. And it affects the residents, the city's infrastructure itself, and then our overall economic growth. And so what does this look like? Ernst & Young is the consultant that we had help us with our SAP this year. And they really scoured and came up with this methodology where we identified potential climate risks that would affect the area. We chose the most relevant risks that affect the Charlotte regional area. And then we analyzed future scenarios. We had 2 scenarios we looked at. High carbon scenario, which is what happens if no one does anything and we don't care about greenhouse gas emissions. What's that going to look like and how are we going to be affected? And then we had a low carbon scenario, which is what happens if we meet all of our goals and maybe even go above and beyond. And we really hit this hard. What are the climate risk in terms of those 2 scenarios and what's in between so that we can make sure we're addressing everything? We put the results in context. So obviously, just because we get some risk information doesn't mean that tells us how it's actually going to affect Charlotte. So we put it into context and then we get feedback from residents. So we had a CEAP awareness survey. We had some public meetings and we've gotten feedback from the residents about what they actually experience. Extreme heat rated really high. We started this toward the end of summer too, which probably helps. You guys may not be worried about extreme heat at the moment. Okay. Fair, that's good. But everyone's going to be worried about it come like May, right? That's where we're really going to start feeling it again. Extreme heat rated pretty highly in terms of the climate risk assessment itself, and it was also the risk of highest concern. This is a map, actually the Charlotte Heat Mappers out of UNC Charlotte. They had a grant and they went around a good portion of the city with monitors, like temperature monitors over the summer. They picked one day in July. We have some data. Now we have the Charlotte Heat Mappers data. Their data shows how hot it actually feels to the pedestrian, right? To the person walking in the neighborhood. Through another effort, we also have high quality urban heat data that we've just gotten access to within the last couple months. So we're pulling those things together to see a more complete picture of urban heat for Charlotte. But overall, that Charlotte has seen a 300% increase in extreme heat days. Doesn't probably shock anybody. This is based off of the base year we used was an average between 1960 and 1990. So that was like the base time frame that we looked at. Low incomes, Black and brown incomes are hardest hit by extreme heat due to less green. We talked about tree canopy earlier. A lot of those neighborhoods don't have tree canopy or a significant amount of tree canopy. More concrete, the urban heat island effect that we have here in the city. I think we've all experienced that. If you go anywhere in the city on any given day in the summer, you can have a variety of temperatures and you feel it. So all of this to say, this is how the climate risk assessment was done, and this is feeding into our update. And so I want to highlight a couple more things. These are the existing goals. Again, we had them up at the beginning of the presentation. Just want to reiterate them. City of Charlotte will strive to become a low carbon city by 2050. So that's our big long-term goal. And then our internal goals was for the city to strive to source 100% of its energy use in buildings and fleet from zero carbon sources by 2030. There's this wonderful big caveat basically saying, we hope to hit it, assuming technology is available that allows us to hit it. Because the reality is if the technology isn't there, we can't do it. And so through engagement feedback, through the studies, with help from our technical advisory committee, we do have these draft goals that we're going to update. We're still going to have 2 separate kind of cohorts, a community-wide set of goals and then municipal goals. So what can we do for the city? Community-wide goal, we are tweaking it. We're not going to be a low carbon city anymore. Our goal is to be a net zero city. And so net zero by 2050, we're keeping that same timeline, but we're adjusting it down. But we're adding in a 2035 kind of milestone with that to help us make sure we're on track. And so this was modeled. We have a graph. How do we hit net zero by 2050? And then we move to 2035. That's the number we use. It is science-based. I can get you all the science you want in a feedback email. But it is science-based. It's also based on equity. What is our fair share of the responsibility of addressing this? And so we have 72% by 2035. We're also adding, this is new, a renewable energy, distributed renewable energy goal. This is going to help us be at that forefront and be a global leader. Like Sarah mentioned, that's one of the city's goals, to be a global leader. How do we do that? Let's add this renewable energy goal. And so our draft goal is 600 megawatts of distributed renewable energy installed in Charlotte by 2035. Now, again, there's a lot of data behind this that I can geek out and get into, but really the why is we want to be a leader. We want clean energy. We want to help clean our grid. This is based off of solar. Solar is what the city has the biggest experience with right now and a lot of success with. So we mapped out solar capacity and then what we have currently. We have 45 megawatts of solar right now. If we map out kind of our trajectory, if we keep at the same pace we are, business as usual would be about 300, a little over 300 megawatts. So we're doubling that. Being ambitious, but there's also a path to reach that. For our municipal goals, we are tweaking them a little bit. We have 5 years of experience now trying to reach these goals. And so reality has come upon us as well. And so we have to match ambition and reality together. And so we're going to source 100% of our electricity use in municipal buildings from zero carbon sources by 2030. So that 2030 timeline is still there, but we're focusing on electricity for that zero carbon. And then we're adding in that we're going to reach net zero emissions in our buildings by 2050. Why are we doing that? We have the community-wide goal the city has to reach it to. That's one. Two, the reason we're focusing on electricity first is because some of our buildings do have natural gas and it is expensive to go in and change it. But it's not just the expense. Does it make sense? Does it make sense to go in to a building where everything's functioning relatively well now, add all that cost for something, or wait until the end of the life cycle and talk about how we retrofit and change it at that point? And so it's more about being intentional about how we're going to achieve it. And then the last one we have here is that the city will reach net zero emissions in its light duty fleet by 2035 and the entire fleet by 2050. So again, the same thing. We're focused on net zero by 2050. We are switching up the 2035 timeline, going from 2030 to 2035 gives us 10 years to hit this. And we're focusing on our light duty fleet first because we know that the technology actually exists there. We actually have the vehicles that we can look at buying. We have some vehicles that don't have an EV option. We are also broadening it a bit because there are different types of fuels. It's not all electric vehicles. And this allows us a little bit more breadth and opens it up for us to be able to look more broadly and achieve these goals. And so I know you guys care about engagement, so I'm going to talk about engagement just briefly. Our engagement framework is that we have the Office of Sustainability and Resilience with our consultants. We're kind of the main core group looking at a lot of this. The next layer is our technical advisory committee, which is made up of experts that are outside of the city. And then we also have the City of Charlotte departments. So I mentioned Office of Sustainability is a horizontal office. We have a team called the CAP operations team, which has representation from all the city departments. We used to meet with them quarterly. Through this process, we've been meeting with them monthly. They're letting us know, hey, this may sound good to you in your office, thinking green, but we have to implement it. So let's talk about what that looks like. They're keeping us a little realistic. And then that last ring is the public engagement. And so I'll talk about a little bit more about what we're doing with that. Before we jumped into it, we came up with public engagement objectives. So we wanted to make sure we had these objectives first. So we made sure that what we did actually met those. So providing information, that's not really engagement, right? That's just sharing the information with everybody. But we wanted to explain the process, get meaningful engagement where it was a two-way conversation, gather input, create different types of opportunities for people. So in public meetings, virtual meetings, surveys, We went to pop-up events. I was at the community area planning events. Most of you, I think, have seen me at one of those. And then really making sure we're taking that input and making direct connections. So what does that look like? We have a picture. Douglas down here in the left with his nice hat.
We're twinning out next meeting, okay?
Well, we went to at least 17 different pop-up events. So examples of this, community area planning meetings. We also went to some meetings with our partners in the community like Soul Nation to share the information. We have since had 2 public CEP Plus specific meetings, our kickoff, and then one specifically about our focus areas. 6 technical advisory. You guys can read the rest of that. A couple things I do want to highlight. Sarah gave a great presentation to our Civic Leadership Academy, and they joined our ambassador team, which is really great to help us get the word out. So that was really awesome. We got a lot of people involved there. I spoke with the Charlotte Urbanist Saturday and got a couple more emails, so I'm going to add people to our cause. We had 319 connections through the community area planning process. 60 plus connections through our engagement ratings. What does that mean? It means that we've actually talked to people. 40 people through Biketoberfest. And then I threw this up here too, just our survey. So we got 353 participants. But what does that mean? That means someone clicked on a link, right? We have over 11,000 responses, which means most of those people actually answered all of the questions. And 464 unique open-ended comments. And so we feel like that means that the survey was pretty successful. It wasn't just a number, we have all of this feedback that we can wrap in. And so what does that feedback look like? This is just an example. Key themes that came up: transportation. Everyone cares about transportation. Education, how can we help get the word out and educate folks? And then green space. So this includes trees, this includes open spaces, this includes all the different types of open space that we have around Charlotte. Resident top priorities: improving access to sustainable modes of transportation, improving quality of life, and then equitable access to any type of programs that we have. And then the top climate concerns were pretty much extreme heat, and then also severe weather. So a lot of this also happened right after Helene and Nashville. So of course, big storms were top of mind for a lot of folks. And so our next steps. So in March, we're going to share our updated focus areas, and I'll give you guys a hint. We realized that workforce development, as great as it is, having it as a separate focus area kind of separated it from the others. So we're embedding workforce development into buildings, energy generation, and transportation. That 4th focus area we've renamed to cross-cutting, and we actually have a strategy under there where we are going to help support implementing the tree canopy action plan. And so we're making that direct connection to tree canopy as well, because that's going to help us directly impact urban heat. But we're going to share focus areas to council. We'll review the strategies and actions with council, and then highlight connections to other priorities like climate justice. This is really big top of mind for folks that work in the city, folks elected or appointed into the city, as well as our residents. In April, we're going to review the full CEP with the council and then work toward adoption. What questions do you have for us?
Thank you, folks. We're going to take questions for 6 minutes.
Short.
I talked way longer. I'm so sorry.
No, it was Candace's fault. Commissioner Winokur.
I'm sorry, I know I don't work for the Sierra Club, so bear with me in terms of the quality of my questions. Two areas real quick. One is you say you're horizontal organization. Who do you guys report to?
I report to Assistant City Manager Liz Babson. So
that's your level. Okay. And in that horizontal structure, like for instance, we had conversations recently with the Department of Transportation when it comes to, a safety focus. right? In terms of a motivation to do something different in our city. It's everybody's responsibility in the Department of Transportation. Some would say that means it's no one's, but the other question then becomes, since your number one sort of controllable, arguably, emission source is road emissions. Your answer so far has been, oh, let's electrify part of the city of Charlotte's fleet. Wouldn't it make more sense to support measures that are intended to get cars off of the road?
So that's a great point. So our goal hasn't been simply to electrify. That is one piece of the puzzle,
Yeah.
but we don't have enough space in the street to electrify people driving their single occupancy vehicles. So as part of this update, we're more directly making that connection to the strategic mobility plan, which has the mode shift goal, which is exactly to your point around how we provide the options for more people to drive not alone, but to take public transit, other sustainable modes of transportation. And so there's a direct connection there. And given the continued conversation around a potential 1 cent sales tax and a referendum that could happen as early as this fall, a big piece of this is, implementation of the updated transportation, the transit, what's known right now as the 2030 transit plan, but that updated plan, in addition to the other companion plans that address sustainable transportation.
Two comments to that. One, there's been so very little actual on the ground progress in this city since the heyday of pre-pandemic, Uptown Cycle Track, disconnected, disjointed sections. But also in terms of, creating more bike lanes and in shared use paths. It's been virtually stagnant, it seems, as in terms of feet on the ground. It's the number one feedback you guys got in your community engagement, yet that's not a big bullet point on any of your slides. So that's my comment. The other one is in terms of electrification of the fleet, how many are we talking about in terms of the city? How many vehicles?
The city has 4,000 total rolling stock.
And does that include CMPD and CATS?
Yes,
It does include CMPD and CATS?
yes,
4,000
yes.
total.
4,000 and
change.
Yeah, and change. Yes.
Okay, and you're talking about electrifying CMPD and CATS too?
Yeah, so CATS has already begun the journey of electrification. And we also work directly with CMPD, and they have also begun the journey of electrification. So it is a full goal which encompasses all of our city vehicles. We have a sustainable fleet policy, which evaluates based on when vehicles are up for purchasing. It evaluates the way the vehicle is used, and then it directs the city to purchase the most sustainable option, given what the operational needs of the vehicle. So what that looks like in practice is that we're not buying electric fire trucks right now. We have one electric fire truck, which will hopefully in the coming months, we'll have a ribbon cutting for our electric fire truck. I don't know what kind of license you need to but I'm sure there'll be an opportunity to check it out. But there are options at the light duty level in almost every case, except for vehicles that are hot seated, meaning vehicles that are driven literally all the time. So they don't have downtime to do the overnight charging. So we're constantly evaluating that. And yes, the goal is full zero carbon fleet by 2050 in this proposed update, which is different than the initial update, but we still have policies in place to move us in that direction. And we're really trying to focus on the area where we believe we can have the most momentum.
So I guess in terms of getting cars off of the road, it would seem like that language would, stand out more rather than just generic greenwashing kind of, terms, in terms of the city. Concrete things that we can get done would seem to be a big in the priority to try to achieve our goals. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick, for using our 6 minutes. Becca? Love you dearly.
I'll go quick. Okay, so has the city considered rebate programs for heat pumps or electric bikes, considering the federal ones are going bye-bye?
Right now, the city has a e-bike program and Monica could probably speak a little bit more to it. But yes, that is definitely a consideration and likely could show up in our updated action plan. So please take a look at that when we post that online to see where that may show up. And if you have other ideas, please comment.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I typed in electric bike rebate Charlotte and literally nothing came up except for Gastonia. So I don't know, in Raleigh.
Yeah, I'll just say that strategically, ours is not a rebate program. We provide electric bikes in partnership with Dream Key.
Oh, that
And
program,
so
yes.
for people who purchase their townhouse through our House Charlotte Plus program, they get an e-bike plus training with Trips for Kids. So it's a 3-legged stool. And we have been strategic with that so that it is not just a kind of like, come get your money, but that it is a economic mobility and economic opportunity resource for those in a very specific area in the North Tryon, North Graham corridor. That program, we are consistently looking for funding to expand that program to other corridors and then potentially throughout the city. But I think we're probably the first in the nation to kind of do it in partnership with affordable housing, like very strategically. And we're even kind of working in parallel on launching it at not just home ownership affordable housing, but also at affordable housing sites where there then is like a pool of bikes that everyone can share from that unit. That takes a little bit longer to get off the ground because you have to have the charging in place and there's a lot of kind of permitting and things around that of how to build all that. But anyways, that's a long answer, but that's where we're headed.
Yeah,
Okay.
Melissa had
And I want you to notice that that's in the north end, right, which is the best end, just so you all know.
I know.
As you know, right? But yeah, if you want to talk about it, I can tell you about it. I got 4 affordable housing units coming up in April and you'll get a bike with those, a free one. I got pictures and everything. I can show you. Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay.
Wait,
And
I have 2 more.
You-
They'll be super fast, I
Be
promise.
super fast.
Okay.
We're running out of time.
Does the city have an uptime percentage for EV chargers that are available to residents? Because Duke doesn't track that.
Yes.
What is it?
So the city has invested in, I don't have it memorized. Go to our CF dashboard, we maybe have 350, 360 ports. About 30% of them are currently available to residents. Then we have a dashboard that has all of the EV charging that's available community-wide. Now, in order to really understand what's publicly available, you need to go to, what's the best app, you think?
Oh, no, I was asking percentage of uptime because because like the federal government with their federal funding, they require 90% uptime. Whereas
you're talking about an efficiency factor for how we charge?
No, so like if they're actually working. Yeah.
So we have all of our current operational with one caveat being our Atom Power chargers, which just came online. All of our ChargePoint chargers have a maintenance and service plan together with them, and they have they track a 99% uptime on all of those chargers. And so, however, if there is damage to the chargers that doesn't have, is from vandalism, of course that number's going to come down because it takes quite a while to get those repairs done.
That's Heather Bullock, our infrastructure strategy manager, and she's the one to answer those questions for sure.
Quickly, we will have Commissioner Lansdale.
Couple things. I'm going to be very aggressive about saying that we do not want to have the storage and charging of private vehicles in public roadways. I know it was maybe a slip there, but we want to focus on mode shift first and foremost. But what I really want to talk about, and real quick, and Robin, I'm only used to seeing you online, so my apologies earlier this morning. The messaging of our CAP has got to change. And watching the last TAP meeting, it's got to change quick. We've had solar panels on X amount of places for X amount of time at X amount of cost. We need to show Y amount of return on investment. We need to show just how quickly we have paid for that in the savings. A couple things that I didn't see on CATS is that when we installed our solar panels for our charging station at our maintenance facility on Tryon, we saw a direct reduction in auto requirements for CATS buses. When we invested in hybrid buses and moving towards electric buses, we saw a direct reduction of fuel purchases for maintenance of those vehicles in operation procedures. We can evaluate a gallon of gas versus a kilowatt very easily. We've got to make this more of a budgetary impact now that we're 5 years in. For example, 5 years ago, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools spent $19 million a year on energy costs. This year, in 2022, when I looked it up, $23 million a year just on energy costs. If we could have gotten solar on Mecklenburg County schools, even $1 million a year worth of solar, we would have 10 times the return on investment in reduction of energy purchases. Now, we can all deal with Duke Energy a little bit later and their investors when we talk about we're not having to buy enough kilowatts and we don't need that kind of level. We want to contribute to the redundancy of the grid by this way. We got to sell the story that this is real for us, that the dollars we spent over the past 5 years, I would be surprised that this would be a very true statement. If it wasn't a very true statement, that they've already paid for themselves within 5 years. I want to hear that story. I want to hear that messaging, especially with the conversation that was heard last week at the TAP. We can't change the world, but we have focused about changing Charlotte and city property and city buildings and city services. And I think we can make a better budgetary conversation in our CIP. No questions, lots of comments.
Thank you, Terry.
Yep.
I
you cut me
agree with
off.
you 100%. Final question goes to Commissioner Russell.
More of a comment, really. Sarah Robin, thank you for the presentation. One thing I saw that was very glaring to me that was an omission
Sure.
is any discussion about land use. Because if we're talking about 40% of transportation and 50% of homes and businesses for cranking out greenhouse gases, but I did not see anything on how that could be addressed. And when I say land use is key there, if you think about our development pattern, we like to go in, build something on a parcel, put a fence around it, keep it separated from other things that are around it. There's no connection to it. When you start encouraging those connections and fostering parcels working together, connections through parcels, whether they be through trails or bike, like Commissioner Winokur was saying, you'll see a direct reduction not only in greenhouse gases, but in car trips. I can speak to that personally. In 7 years in the area in which I live, we took in 5,000 residential units. We saw no appreciable increase in traffic because the community demanded that anything that was new connected to what it was surrounding it. And when you do that intentionally, we saw people starting to ride bikes. We saw people starting to run. We saw people exercising in places that, quite frankly, I didn't see or anybody saw. And so if you really want to tackle that, that needs to be front and center. Because if we're not changing land use, the transportation and the homes and businesses will not change. So that would be my suggestion. Thank
Yeah, I appreciate that.
All right, thanks. Thanks, ladies, for coming down. We will pay attention. I guess April is the big showdown time.
Yeah, my call to action for you guys, we're gonna have a public draft up in March,
Oh.
and I'll let you guys know, and you can share out with your networks.
Please do send it and we'll give you comments back. Oh, you're stretching? Good. Yeah, because
Yeah, sure. That is
Yeah.
banging logo.
Isn't
All
that
right.
great? Our communication team.
Okay. All right, everybody, we've still got 5 minutes worth of meeting and we're going to cram 5 minutes worth of meeting into it. I'm going to skip over our little report where we talk about the things that we did. And I'm going to go directly to our homework. Can we go to our homework? Boop, boop, boop. And I guess this is the part where yeah. This is going to be fun. All right. So your homework is about housing and lettuce. we wanted to have an affordable housing meeting, and we're gonna work on that one, right? So next slide. If you guys don't know, and some of you don't know what affordable housing is. People say affordable housing, and then I always talk about housing affordability, that sort of thing. But check this out so that if we have an affordable housing confab here in a couple of months, you guys will know what the terms are. And this is very short, succinct, and you'll know what the good things are. Next slide. Do you guys know what this is?
Lettuce.
It's lettuce.
Innovation.
Hey, all right. Yeah, it's Adrena Farms is over at the Innovation Barn, and
See from Barbarella?
no. Barbarella, Terry's going so old school on this. I mean, really. All right. You guys know where this is? This is in a tower in Calgary that is the same height as the radio tower building of First Union or Wells Fargo over here. All right. Now, everybody talks about this notion that we should repurpose our office buildings as apartments. But next slide, maybe we should do something else with those buildings. This article is about what happens when you have an empty floor and you put a farm in it. That's probably not in the UDO. I'm going to go out on a limb. All right. Now, and I don't know if that counts as a downsizing, but what if we could? All right, because that old radio tower building's 33% occupied, right? I think that's the number somebody said to me. So that means there's a lot of empty floors in there.
Can we do that with hog farms too?
We could do that with just about any. Hog farms would be that'd make the elevator shaft something interesting. Okay. So couple of things for you guys. Here's our meeting schedule for the next, here's our meeting schedule. Pay attention, and all of these are on days. There's no shifting for holidays or anything. So we should have the normal meeting schedule. Our next planning commission meeting will be microtransit. Our full work session will be microtransit next month. We're gonna have folks from Jump, Jaunt, Skipper, and Cats coming to talk to us and giving us kind of like, hey, we did some microtransit, here's what happened. Our next planning committee meeting, which is on the 18th, we've got the Charlotte Regional Data Trust. So anybody that needs to get their groove on with some data, they've collected data from everybody and everything. I'm not sure if that's, Terry, I'm looking at you. Yeah, Terry's a data guy. But we'll find out what they've got in their bag, because I think they got a big old bag. That's the way that goes. So I think we're done. Do I hear a motion for us to adjourn this meeting?
Motion to adjourn, Wilden.
All right, that motion is passed.
Fair greeting to the executive meeting. Guinness.